Dream Report is a reporting tool that allows you to visualize data from multiple sources. These videos are designed to help you get up and running with Dream Report in no time. So let's jump right in. What I'm going to show is a way of getting data into Dream Report, but it will actually require you to create SQL statements. Now, there's two ways of doing this. One is where we actually type the SQL statement in for each instance that we want to pull data in. And another way is we will create a SQL statement that is a permanent SQL statement, almost like an object that you can then refer to pull the data out. And this will be a little bit clearer once you see me go through it. With this way we're going to be doing it today, you will notice one thing different is we will not define an ODBC driver. We will create a DSN data source. We will go through that process, but we will actually not create an ODBC driver out of Dream Report to be able to do this. So with that being said, let's jump right into it. First off, here's my SQL server. I want to show you this. I've got a table. I've got two records in that table, like a production table of a product we're going to make and the quantity we're going to make, and I've got a timestamp around that. So I'm going to show how all that comes in to Dream Report. The timestamp is going to be important because when we do this query, we're getting this data from SQL Server. We're going to have to, or the way I'm going to set it up is to specify that I want the data based off the first record within the table, and it's going to be using the date timestamp to make that determination. Over on Dream Report, what we're going to start off by doing is going into DSN Manager. And what DSN Manager does, it's an easy way for us to create the DSN configuration from within Dream Report and not have to go into Windows and create it. By the way, it does use the 32-bit DSN. This just makes it a little bit easier to find all this and get it set up. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to give us a DSN definition name. So for my DSN definition name, I'm just going to use SQL 2019 underscore DD underscore name. Now, I do not have a DSN created yet, so I'm going to hit this plus to add to DSN. This stops us from having to configure this within Windows. So I'm going to come down here, I'm going to tell I want to use a system data source. I'm going to select the one I want to use, which is SQL in our case. Click Finish. And now I've got to give it a name. And in my case, I'm just going to name it SQL 2019 underscore DSN. The server, in my case, is SQL 2019. That is the name of my SQL server that I'm going to be connecting to. Click Next. I'm going to use the SQL Server authentication. You may choose to set yours up differently and use a Windows authentication, but I'm going to use SQL Server authentication. I want to change it to the default database that I know I'm trying to work against, which is this ESE test. It is the one that contains that table that I showed you a few minutes ago. Click Next, and I'm going to click Finish, and then I'm going to test this. And I see I got a test connect completed successfully. So that's important that we run that test that tells us this connection was able, or Dream Report to DSN has been created correctly. So, okay. Now, at this point, I actually got to go and select that after I created. So that plus icon or the plus button, all it did was launch the DSN creator to create the DSN. Now I'm telling it my DSN definition name is going to use the one I just created. I'm going to give it a login. Again, you may choose to do yours differently, or yours may be different. I'm just going to test this again. So I'm seeing I got a completed test successfully, and I'm just going to add it. So now what I have is the SQL 2019 DSN definition name. It's an ODBC, and it uses the DSN SQL 2019 underscore DSN, and it's using a SA login. So at this point, I just click OK, and that part of it has been set up. Now that we have the DSN set up, completed, we're ready to jump right in to creating the report because we don't need to configure a driver for this. So I'm just going to right click tell it new report. And I'm just going to take the default settings here. We will have other videos to go through how to configure all this report setup stuff and different ways you can do that. But we're just going to do an apply and okay. So what we need to do to begin with, for the first way of doing this, is we're going to set up a SQL statement that is permanently defined within Dream Report that we can reuse over and over again. And the way we do that is with SQL Manager up here at the top. So if I click on that, I've already got one defined, and I'm just going to show you how that's set up, and then I'll set up another one. But I've got it named SQL MES query, and I actually typed this SQL statement to run against that database. Now, if you remember, the database is a little MES table that we defined, and it's basically got our order number, our product, our quantity, and the date timestamp. Now, if you notice, the default order, the way this was entered into the database was soaps, and then the candles was put in, and that matches up with the date timestamp. On this particular one, what I'm asking for, the one I defined at this point in time, was to query that data, but do and sort on that data by the quantity in ascending order. Now, the one I'm going to create is I'm going to create another SQL statement within Dream Report, and we're just going to call it SQL MES Query 2, but I'm going to change this query statement to where it's going to be in a descending order based off of the quantity. So I'm going to create one, and that's basically all there is to it. You give it a name, and then you have to type the entire SQL statement, whatever you want it to be, because you can create and define and build queries against databases the way you need to make it for your application. So it's probably, I would say, more powerful than the other way we were doing it, but it also requires a little bit more knowledge to be able to make this work. So I'm going to say, okay. So now what I've got is I have two different ones. Remember, this one is an ascending order and this is a descending order. So now that we've got that defined, I'm just going to go over here on my object, and I'm going to do a SQL query table. And I'm going to do that. And at this point, I got to give it that data source name, which we defined earlier. And now I'm going to choose an existing query. And I'm going to choose the first one that I'd already created, and I'm just going to add it. And then you can go into the appearance if you want to. I would encourage you, for what we're doing, you notice it defaulted with this sort being on. Always check this, because Dream Report does this thing where it remembers previous configurations. At least that's what I've seen with it. And you're going to want to make sure that they're not going to interfere with what you're actually trying to do. So I don't want this thing doing any sorting. I'm letting my SQL statement handle my sorting. So I'll turn that off, and then I'm going to say, it's got, in this instance, you need to set it up to where it's use query directly. Click OK. So that's the first one, right? So we should see the values listed off in an ascending order. So we're going to create one more. And this one, we're going to, again, select the DSN name. But we're going to use the second one I created. Again, I'm going to check this. Sure enough, the sort was on. So I'm going to check that. I'm going to make sure that when I pull this back, it should be in descending order based off of this query statement. Say OK. So now we're basically done. And the key to this is when you're building out these reports using this method, you won't be creating those query statements every time, because they are built within Dream Report now, or stored within Dream Report into SQL Manager, and what you saw me configure earlier. So now I want to do run project. Yes, I want to save this. I'm going to upload it to the runtime manager, and then we're going to run the report and see the information come back. Okay, so I'm going to do a generate report, and I'm going to view it. And sure enough, you can see where the first one did the quantity in ascending order, and the second one did the quantity in descending order. So that's one of the ways you can pull back data directly from the database using SQL statements. Okay, with the second way of doing this, we don't need two of these, so I'm just going to delete one and delete that one. Again, click on the SQL query table, draw that out, and on our data source, again, it's the same data source, but this time we're not going to use a predefined query that's stored within Dream Reports. We're going to type it out. So there's this visual query builder, which is kind of pretty neat, to be honest with you. So if You open it up. Once you define that DSN, it'll be able to look at that table. I can click the table I want, and then I can go through, pick off the values I want returned. I want you to sort the quantity, sort type, ascending, descending, whatever it may be. And if I click OK there, or just click down here, you'll see it says order MSQ data ascending. When it says ascending there, I could tell it descending and puts the descending. So you could do it like that, or you could have just typed it in by hand. We're going to go ahead and use this easy little builder here. Now, I will say this, sometimes these queries can get a little complex. Kind of your call on this, how you want to handle it, but we're going to go with this one to where it's just going to build it in descending order. We just use a visual GUI inside Dream Report to be able to do it. That should be all good and set up. So I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to go to my appearances. And again, I want to turn this sort off because I want the sort being done over here. I put the sort inside my query statement. You could have done a where statement and actually done a filter on this, and we'll do some later videos about how to do that. But again, you got a lot of power with this. I can actually tell it to bring the data back where only the quantity is greater than 100. And then I could have associated another field on my report to where I could have plugged in, instead of it being defaulted at 100, I could have referenced it. I could, in other words, told Dream Report that I wanted it where it was greater than 100. Or think of a batch report where I just want to see certain batches brought back. Again, you could have that a drop-down box on the report. You select the batch you want, then it goes back and pulls all the associated values based off that batch. So that's how that stuff would work out. That's getting a little bit beyond what we're trying to show right here, just trying to show how we can actually connect Dream Report to a relational database. I've created this SQL statement using the GUI configuration. So now we should be able to select OK, and now we're ready to run this report. So if I click Run Report, yeah, do I want to save it? Yes, I do. It's uploading it to the runtime engine. So now I'm going to do a generate report, and then we're going to look at the PDF, and we can see we got it in descending order. So that's the other way you can build a Dream Report connected to SQL Server. Again, two different ways of doing it. I would say this is probably a little bit more advanced. You got more capabilities with doing it this way versus the simple way that I showed in the previous video. But as you can see, Dream Report is fully capable of communicating to databases in at least 3 different ways. It does change the licensing model a little bit. If you're going to be using a lot of what I just showed you here, where you're actually generating SQL statements, when you get your licensing or look to purchase it, you make sure you get the MES option because of tag count. It will allow unlimited MES queries. The other way is actually going to bite into your tag count with Dream Report if you do it the simple way that I showed in another video. So you just kind of got to weigh that out. Let us know if this video was helpful by clicking the like button below. If you want to learn more about Dream Report, contact your local ES&E representative.